everybody. Excuse my voice. Not only have I got a Scottish accent, but I've got a bit of a respiratory problem. So I'm a husky, and I've been getting told that I'm sexy. My voice is sexy. You should feel it from my side, I'll tell you. As I say, I come from Scotland, and I've been trying to live as well as I can in my community with a diagnosis of dementia. And that's dementia of the Alzheimer's type. And we're teaching people to say when they're talking that they've got dementia and then say what type, so that people realise that there's over 200 types of dementia and one size doesn't fit all. So I'm going to try to speak slowly, and I'm delighted to be back here in Canada. I was here with Cherie and Lisa from Marip in 2011 in Toronto. And that's when I was starting to think I needed to go into a nursing home. And I was having issues with sensory problems. And trying to negotiate in my everyday life was now becoming scary and indeed dangerous. And I had done the maths. They told me I would have 10 years. I probably had it about 3 years. And I'd done the maths and I thought, oh gosh, I've got a year left, you know. And I think it'll need to be a nursing home. I come from a nursing background, trained as an army nurse. So you can tell I didn't see many people with dementia in the army. I've seen some mad, bad, scary guys, but none with dementia. So I believed throughout my nursing career that dementia was all about memory. And that's what I was taught away in the days. But as you can see from this slide, in Scotland, dementia is classified as a mental health condition with physical symptoms and social implications. Well, when I got diagnosed in the letter, I was asked to go up to the hospital to see the specialist. And when they said mental health, I phoned my friend who was a number thing, can't remember what you call that, accountant. And I said, they think I'm mental. I don't know what's going wrong here, you know. What am I getting sent into this area for? And she says, don't worry, Agnes, we'll put our power suits on and we'll let them know that there's nothing wrong with your mental abilities, that this is, a disease process. So we did, and we frightened my specialist. I don't think he's ever got over it, And I had him for about 5 or 6 years until I became old. And then I had to go to the older people. I couldn't remember my age. And when he told me that this was going to happen, you've no idea what it done to me. I walked around in distress, saying, what age am I? Because I never knew. So yes, so being sent into that area, not knowing why, and I was being in with lots of different mental health conditions. So what happened to me? I got my diagnosis. I was shocked. I got told I had early onset, early stage dementia, and all they tested was memory. I had that many brain scans. At least I knew I had a brain, whether it was damaged or not. But they were testing memory. And my daughter and us, we could put tips and strategies and wee alarms going on. We were coping with the memory side, but not the sensory type. Not the sensory. And when I brought up that I was having sensory problems, I got this. Where's the lovely lady that was on before? I got the pat in the head. I got treated like that. I was 57 years of age and I was not amused, I'll tell you, when they said to me, that'll be your dementia. And I was thinking, yeah, so how do I live with it? But they had nothing, no guidance, no nothing. And nobody asked me about my sensory challenges. And as I say, when I brought it up, there was very little assistance, either practical or emotional. Now, if you woke up tomorrow and you suddenly couldn't see, you'd be a bit emotional, wouldn't you? And just to get a pat in the back and to say, that'll be your dementia, off you go, and you get bumped by a car, thrown over the bonnet, and you're supposed to be able to cope with that without getting some emotional and some validation of what was happening to you. But I was fortunate. I was campaigning, and I met some beautiful people with dementia, and this is some of them. And they gave me my help in understanding. They gave it to me in humour. And sometimes they gave me a kick up the butt, you know. And that can only happen from peers and people that are going through what you're going through. But, you know, we, the people with dementia, spent more time talking about sensory issues than we did about memory. We laughed about our memory. We always said just, a funny story. But we couldn't find anything funny about being burnt. We couldn't find anything funny about, as I say, crossing the road and standing there in full of fear. So as I say, I was in Toronto, thankfully, in 2011, and I heard a wonderful lady, Mary McKinley. You remember, Cherie? And I was supposed to be coming up, and I was having issues with the environment. I was getting panicked. I couldn't negotiate the carpet. I was falling. I was full of bruises. And I thought, I can't do this. I really can't do it. And the lovely lady, she gave me the proper medical words for what was happening to me. And she explained to me that doctors didn't what was happening, and that it was a visual processing thing. So I had neurological vision impairment, and I thought, I like that better than dementia. That sounds really impressive. I can't wait to go and see my consultant or my specialist and bring this one out. So I had to practice so that I would say it, flippantly. And then she gave me the other wonderful word, because I was having issues with different noises, pitches, and I was having startled reflex from it. And she says, that's hyperacusis. I says, oh, you'll need to spell that. So it was a big learning curve for me. So when you're thinking about dementia, and if I went out, and if we all went out with our clipboards and asked the general public, they would talk about memory. We found that no one was talking about the senses. And when I say we, I'm talking about people with dementia. And they weren't signposting us on, as you would expect. I would expect if this was happening to me, they would signpost me on. And if there was nothing they could do, the least they could do was train Donna up as a guide for my vision. And there would be tips of where to sit when all this noise pollution, as I call it, comes about. And when I asked my new audiologist, she looked at me shocked and she said, tips? No, there's nothing. And I think, I don't believe that. But no, there was nothing. And there's nobody in the UK getting any tips on how to live with this. Our care partners are not being shown where's the best place to sit, what to do, what to ask for. We've just to accept bad practice. So at conferences, when we were speaking and listening to the wonderful speakers, people with dementia were becoming quite angry and quite critical. What do they know? They can stigmatise me all you like. I just want to be able to eat. I want to be able to go out at Christmas time. I want to be social. They're talking about dementia-friendly communities. But if it's not going to be enabling for our senses, we're not going to go into them. So I was at the Alzheimer Europe conference. Thank God it was held in Glasgow. So that was easy for me because I come from Glasgow. And Life Changes Trust, which is a charity, they funded nearly 40 to 50 people with dementia to attend, which was very unusual because normally it's mainly professionals. And that was a big turning point. So these 40 to 50 people ended up at a break in what they call the quiet room. And my goodness me, there was angry voices, there was banging of table, and I was sitting thinking, what on earth? And they were talking about how the professionals were not listening to them, and they weren't asking the proper questions so that we could get help. Now, I can do that and complain. I'm quite a good, thing like that. But I get fed up, and I stood up and banged the table and said to them, are you just a crowd of moaners? Should we do something about it? You've got dementia. You're not stupid. So why should you think the professionals should fix it? It's quite obvious that they might have their degrees, but they're really quite stupid if they can't fix this. And they kind of looked at me. Now, they were all over Europe here and not used to the Glasgow way, And so what I done was I said to them, in conferences, they have tables. And I happened to glance and see this one. And I knew it was Life Changes Trust, but they were saying that they were giving out grants. And I went down to the table, marching like somebody, I was on a mission. And I was on a mission to get money so that we could write a booklet. And the booklet was going to be plain, simple, and to the point. And it was going to be in our language, in our words. So we got the money. You don't just get money, it has to go to the board, we all know that. But we were granted the money, and that resulted in the booklet. The booklet is the result of interviewing 24 people with dementia. We could have interviewed 124, but we didn't have the money, the time, and Donna had to give up her job to do this for us. The booklet doesn't profess to have the answers. What we wanted to do, we wanted to show that there were more than one person having these issues, and it didn't matter where we were coming from, you were hearing the same words over and over. And we hoped the booklet would encourage the professionals to think how they could assist us. So when Donna was transcribing, good grief, she had to sit and with hours and hours and hours. You might see 2 minutes of a clip, but that could have taken a full day, because you have to let people's stories and lived experience come. And she was typing it out word for word. And she said that she spoke, what was recurrent theme coming through, what everyone was saying was they had to be aware of what their issue is. So if it was hyperacusis, they have to be aware of this. We found that some people had it, but they weren't aware of the word. And they were accepting that it was their dementia. And then they had to accept that this was a new change in their life. And then the next big one was we had to adapt. And adapting is where we needed the tips and strategies. And then, if all else fails, avoid the damn situation. It's no brainer, So the booklet would not have happened if it hadn't been people with dementia. They gave their passion, they gave their time, and they shared their lived experience. And this photo was taken at a dementia engagement and empowerment project. And I bought the booklet. They'd all took part in the booklet. And you can see they were dancing with joy. They were running around. Can I have 5 booklets? I'm taking this here, there, and everywhere. They were so pleased to see that now it's in print. And we all know once you print something, it becomes real. So they couldn't deny us any longer. The feedback from the booklet and DVD has been so positive. In fact, we'd done a poster and took it to Slovenia, and the poster won an award. We couldn't believe it. People liked it. They liked the simplicity, and they loved what it was saying to them. Life Changers Trust, they're the ones that are distributing the booklet. They thought they were, they were getting away. They were £5,000 to do the booklet or whatever, and then print it, and that would be it over. No, it took a life of its own. And they tweeted that the booklet has been downloaded from their website 700 times, viewed on YouTube 1,100 times, and there are 15 to 20,000 booklets currently circulating worldwide. We now have independent printing. So when I was in Australia, they were getting inundated for copies that they thought it would be easier and better if they got permission and printed their own copies. And that's what they've done. The Czech Republic, they done the same thing, and I was laughing. When they printed it and transcribed it into Czech, they sent me it to look over and to see if they were... And I thought, what do they think I am, Anyway, so it was good. It was good. But we've been amazed. We thought it was just going to raise awareness in the dementia world with the thing. Not so. Architects are using it in training for the new people coming through. They're now talking about acoustics and how they can make buildings enabling for people with hyperacusis. Nutritionists loved it. And I'm thinking, why? And they said, because we are seeing this all the time, but we're getting people with dementia said it's swallow. Everything is down to swallow. When you have food issues, it's swallow. And she said it's costing the government a lot of money, a lot of expertise of us, a lot of inappropriate testing when it's not swallow. And I had my nursing head on when I was talking to my specialist about my issues with my inability to taste food. And so I no longer can have coffee, and I was a coffeeholic, which was terrible. I can't even have a glass of wine with my steak. Donna is horrified with that. But we all know that going out with your mates, like Al and them done last night, is social, it's inclusive, and it's nice. It's my worst nightmare. They give me a menu and I look at it. I don't know what my brain is going to accept today. It's temperamental. And I'll look at Donna and I'll say, what will I order? And that puts a pressure on Donna. The other thing is Donna does my shopping. She doesn't know what to buy because we don't know what I can eat. So it's not a taste. Everybody says with aging, your taste changes, and we all know that we maybe get a wee bit sweeter in our thing with that. It's nothing to do with that. I was eating and putting stuff in my mouth, and I do call it stuff because I never knew what it was, and I was spitting it out. Now, how rude is that if you were out with me? Not nice at all. I didn't have, with my cognitive, I couldn't even hide it. I made a big scene and I spat it out and I said, get the chef, this is off. Not knowing that my brain could not distinguish what the taste was. And so that is happening more and more. And so I didn't know. The booklet's been getting taken to GPs, opticians and audiologists. And I'm going to come back to audiologists in a minute. The booklet, the people with dementia were taking it and saying, the way I was talking, and I was saying my eyes I can't see. And my optician is saying my eyes are healthy, my glasses are thing. But they'll take money, and they'll give you new glasses, but they know in your heart and soul that they're the same prescription as before, and you still can't see. But nobody was explaining to me that this is a brain dementia issue. Nobody said to me that my brain was no longer able to interpret what it was saying. So my eyes are healthy, and that was good news, and they always loved to tell me that. And after they took my money, they then sent me home with no hope. And I thought, no, we can't do this. We need to find another way. So I was pushing it, and I now had the official words. I had the knowledge of meeting people like yourselves. So I went to my optician, and I said to them, I want, after he'd done all this stuff, I want to be referred to the hospital. I want an official diagnosis of what's going on. So that took a while, and we got to see the ophthalmologist in the hospital. And I went through lots of testing. The government's got lots of money to spend on all these testing. And it came out, and they said, now listen to this, you've got neurological vision impairment. And I thought, I get told, Mary told me that years ago. Why wouldn't you listen to me? We could have cut to the chase. You could have believed me. Anyway, they officially now have labelled me with this. And the man was lovely. And he said to me, there's nothing we can do for you. I'm so sad. And I thought, I haven't the time or the patience to tell him that's not true. No, you cannot make my brain see, but you should be giving us self-management tips on how to live with it and giving us hope. But we done it ourselves, and I got to see a low vision officer, and she took Donna through, and they gave me a white pointer stick, so when I cross the road, the motorists will know that I have vision issues. And then they put me on the partially sighted register, because it's got that bad. So it was really quite funny when I seen it. So then I thought, right, that's the eyes done. I've got that confirmed. We knew it, but now it's confirmed. And then I thought, we'll go to the second phase, hyperacusis. This is going to be more difficult. So I asked my dementia specialist if I could be referred to an audiologist. And she says, Agnes, there's nothing wrong with your hearing. You can hear the grass grow. I said, aha, that is the problem. I said, and I can hear the conversation that their colleagues are having next door if they leave the door open. So she said, she just shakes her head and she says, if you want to see an audiologist, there's a letter. See an audiologist. And I went to see the audiologist. That wasn't so easy. The audiologist, they want you to be deaf. It's so easy, you know. And hyperacusis, I think she was saying they get a day in their training, Donna, on hyperacusis, that's all. And a week on tinnitus. So she really wanted me to have tinnitus. So she knew about tinnitus, so we would do about tinnitus. And I stuck my head, and I really said, no, I don't have ringing in my ear. Right? If you told her next door to shut up, there would be no noise in my head. So anyway, hyperacusis. This means that my brain is unable to cope with certain sounds, tones and pitches. The background noise, you know the horror stories. You go shopping in the mall and you can't think for the noise. Well, if you already can't think, can you imagine where I am? So when the audiologist done a test, she said, how are you going out? You're off the chart with this. I've never seen anyone. And I thought, because it was neglected for years, of course I'm going to be off my chart. And she said, I'm surprised you're coping with sensory overload. And I said, well, you know, I've nothing else to do, because one thing I'm never going to be is a prisoner in my own home because of noise pollution outside. So as through the Churchill Fellow, I went to Ireland and I was speaking to an audiologist, and she told me, see, the lady, that my audiologist didn't tell me what test she was doing. But here, this test is called the Uncomfortable Loudness Level Test. And no, they don't do it routinely. You have to ask for it. I'm not an audiologist, how do I know to ask for that test? So we found out, and this is going to be really good, is that people can request this. But then she said, but you know, people with dementia are non-compliant. And I said to her, well, should you not adapt your test? You know, I mean, it's against my human rights to say you can't give a test because you need to adapt it. So at the moment, they haven't adapted it. But with the booklet, we were very disappointed. We loved the booklet. We loved that they were using it. But that wasn't what we wanted. We wanted people to do tips and strategies so we could live well. And instead of that, they took our lovely piece of work, made their work great, used it in training and done nothing for us. That didn't sound very balanced in that. So in 2016, because I'm stubborn, and I've always been stubborn, I thought, okay, if you're not going to do it, we'll do it ourselves. And someone told me about the Churchill Fellow, and I don't know if you've known about the Churchill Fellow, because I didn't. It's for Commonwealth countries, so Canada can get it. So you can apply for a Churchill Fellow, and you can travel. And I thought, oh, I could go to Canada. They know the words. They're bound to by now have some strategies. And I'll go to Canada, find out what they're doing, and come back and inform the UK. And I also wanted to go to Ireland because I like the Irish. And because they had an Irish working group and they were doing good stuff there. So for my Churchill Fellow, you travel to exchange knowledge and return to disseminate my findings. So when I was at the Churchill Fellow, you go through all the processes. And the last process is to start out with thousands and keep thinning it down, narrowing it down. So anyway, I think it was about 400, the last one. Anyway, they were interviewing them at a panel in London, and the heads of all the department. And I went in, and the first man annoyed the hell out of me. And I thought, oh, I don't like you, going through my head. And what can you do to me? And he was really saying, what if you go to Canada and Ireland and find there's nothing? You know, and I thought, well, God, if we did that, if Winston Churchill had that attitude during the war, we'd be all under the Germans. Anyway, so I said to him, you know, I come from Glasgow, and if there is nothing, we'll create something. In fact, what I'm going to create is a UK dementia sensory guide. But I hadn't spoken to Dawn about that. And that made me feel better, because I thought, you're not getting the better of me. And so that's what I'm going to do. The things that I found out, we're going to collate it together. And with United Kingdom people with dementia and professionals, which is audiologists, etc., we're going to find a solution. But dementia is a global crisis, and so it's a global solution. I've come to Canada, and please be proud. I have spoken to researchers here, and they're getting it. I'm going back to Scotland. I don't know where I was, and I said to Aaron, the young man, I says, can you see that phone of yours? Could you Google and see if there's anything like that in Scotland? I says, because I campaign with a working group. I says, and I've never heard, and they've never asked our opinion. What on earth are they doing? And he found out that Glasgow Uni has a similar department. So when I go back, I'm going to be knocking on some doors to see what they're doing, and I'm going to brag quite a bit about the good stuff you're doing in Canada. So my hope is that people with dementia, and this is what keeps me going, and people will say to me, why are you doing this, Agnes? you're getting tired, my dementia is getting worse, my symptoms are, and it's time to slow down. But I don't want people to go through what I went through. I'm not going to stop until there is a guide and there is a place where carers and people can go to get help, and they have the appropriate words that I have. In June 2016, I was pleased. No, I wasn't pleased, because I had to go to Australia, and like what the lady was saying, it's a long journey, but I needed to go. So I went to Australia, so the journey wasn't that great. And I was speaking as a keynote speaker at Hammond Kia, and I wanted to go and see their villages and see what they're doing for long term, because I now realise that I'm living alone. This is my next step, and what I had seen of care, I didn't like it. We need to get it fixed before I get in there, or there'll be some challenging behaviour. So yes, but what Hammond Kia, when they were talking, and they have what they call, it's new, severe behavioural responses. I don't think Danielle would like that word, but anyway, because that's what they're calling it, and it's government funded. So if you have someone in your Schlegel village, I can't believe that this would happen, and there was behaviour that's challenging you and the staff, they ask you to phone, and they will promise to come out and address it. So that was good. But that what they realised was a lot of what was being labelled as challenging behaviour was sensory and environmental. And when I had given the talk, this one lady, part of the team, she says, I'm just seeing this young man and I know exactly what's wrong now, but we never thought of that before. So I think what I'm saying to people, when you think dementia and when you hear about dementia, don't just think about cognitive, think dementia, think sensory. And there was a lovely man, Ross, and I'm going to leave the last words with him. Normally we play a clip of this, but we didn't bring it this time. But Ross has been diagnosed, he comes from Falkirk, he's been diagnosed 17 years with his dementia, still lives in the community. And I said, when he was speaking it, I says, Ross, what would you say to the people who see the clip and that? What would be your message? And I thought it was brilliant when he said, lots of people have been interviewed for this booklet. We can't all be wrong. So please take a copy, look at it, listen to it, take something out of it. And that's not a lot to ask. So you can download the booklet free of charge on the Life Changes Trust website. There's also links to the DVD online as well. I believe it's YouTube. But the legacy of this project has been amazing. It's been an increased awareness in people with dementia, their carers and friends. Professionals are all now changing the words in the way they're approaching dementia. Professionals are asking for training, especially in nursing homes, because the personal assistants, they knew that there was something more going on, and they want training to understand what it is. And I was at a village in Schlegel Village after I'd given a talk in the town hall. I love the names. And one of the residents said, the residents need training to understand, because they're sharing the tables with people with dementia. And this lady was annoyed because someone was drinking out of her glass, and she was making such a big fuss about it. And she was saying, and she was going on. And I says, well, get 2 glasses of water and put yours out the road and put that one down and let her drink it. But she says, why? She needs to learn table manners. And I thought, we need to... So I was explaining to her, and she says, I need training on this. I'm sharing a table with 2 people with dementia, and their behaviour is causing her distress. Now, I'm going to leave it at there, and I'm going to thank you. It's early, because I want time to ask for you to ask questions. But I'm going to warn you now, if you haven't got questions, I've got 1 or 2 here for you. So it's up to you. And just to let you know, one of the questions is, if I decided to live in your faculty, and you've listened to my story and my lived experience, what help would you give me? What training would you need to guide me so that I could negotiate the area in my environment? And who would you go to for help to get that? Do you know? Who's the best people to do it? And another thing I'm going to ask is, can you think of any resident in your area that has stopped using hearing aids? And they're throwing them away, they've lost them, or they're in the pocket, and they're saying it's their dementia. And I'm here to tell you it's because hearing aids are to make the noises louder, and that's not what people with hyperacusis want. But you can go to the audiologist and ask them to calibrate that hearing aid and do the test so that they can take the uncomfortable loudness levels down to a living way. But you won't know to do that if you don't know the words. So take that away, please. And also, if I was coming up to you and saying, what tips can you give me? Look at my arm, it's all bruised. I'm bumping into this thing, I'm doing this. What tips? How can we address the issues that I'm highlighting? So that's a couple of things that I would like you to think. You don't need to answer them. Just take it back to your place of work and think differently when you're dealing with others there. There's more to dementia than memory. Think dementia, think sensory. Thank you. I'm on time.
So is there any questions? I know there's one person online so far who's got a question. Maybe we'll go to them first.
How do we best support our neighbors with hypersensory perceptions in a neighborhood with 32 people, which can often get very loud and very busy, specifically around dining?
Yes. Dining experiences, as said, is sensory overload. And I was very pleased to see that in a lot of the Schlegel villages you have different models of care, and there is quiet areas that you could go into. And I think this is one of the best practices that you could put in, and say that not everyone wants to eat in a loud environment. And again, it's going back to your personalisation and your freedom and your right to be able to eat in an environment that is good for you. So my question would be, ask the person who's having the issue and find out what have you've got. Think in a different way and how you can be inclusive. And you'll find that there'll be more than one, and you could create a less noisy environment. And again, there's lots of things you can do. You'll notice the chairs here have got plastic things on them and they don't rattle. Not many homes have got that. A lot of them have no carpets because of the dining experience. So you need to look out, how can you silence, where is the noise coming from? I have an app in my phone and it's called, what's it called, Anna? Some app anyway, and it's loudness levels, a decibel meter, I think it's called. And when I go into a noisy restaurant, and if I was eating in that area, I would put my decibel meter on. And it's almost like it goes, you know, the traffic lights, green's okay, orange is a bit dodgy, and red is get the hell out of there, you know? And I would suggest that it's get the hell out of that nursing home, because they're not thinking of being person-centred to the eating experience of people with dementia. Oh yeah, I was saying, Donna saying background noise. It's the chatter and the chitter of the people who are dishing out the food. I really don't know if you want to know if your child is having a good time or if you fell out with your husband and all of that. And I certainly don't want music put on to drown out what is already noisy. It's only putting layers of noise. So I think what you need to do in a situation like that is you need to look at your dining room. You need to see what's creating the noise. That might be that you need to put, the tablecloths on the dining table. But room dividers. You can buy them and you open them out. Put curtains on the window. Something to dull the noise and to create the noise, So I have not been able to eat out in Canada since I've arrived, except for the other day, and it was very difficult. But I wanted to speak to Lisa, and what's that lovely lady I said? No, Brenda, and we'd lots to talk about. So I have to make a decision. Have to tolerate and put up with the noise, and the noise pollution is horrific. And so the children are on holiday, and you want children to be. We should have been able to ask for a quiet area. We didn't need the music, but it was there. And I thought, no, Agnes, just suck it up and get on with it. But if I was living here, I would want something done about it. I also am suggesting that, the way you get TripAdvisors with the restaurants and things like that, and they give them stars. I think we need to start having restaurants noise pollution, so that if you want to have a quiet, you can look up and you can see what restaurant in your area, and this will be great for your dementia friendly communities, and let them know, so that if someone phones up and says, we're coming in, can we have a quiet area? I'm not saying young ones are not entitled to their noise, but I'm saying we are equally entitled to our quietness. So create the ability to pull a screen round and have noise-free meal. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We have one more related question, actually. So in coming up with the creative solutions that you just mentioned, in long-term care, we're often faced by challenges with funding, with layouts, with fire codes, other regulations, particularly funding. So in coming up with creative solutions, do you have any strategies around, where can we get the money to implement these things?
Go to the cheap high store locally. You just go and look and see what they're charging you megabucks for, and then go to your local high store and find something that you can be creative with to be able to do that. You can get lovely drapes. You can be creative, and I'm sure there's staff members that can be creative to use this to be so that it deadens the noise. Unfortunately, money is tight, but I've found that the majority of the time it's not money, it's knowledge on how to know what is causing the noise, and then to go and look for creative solutions that are fairly cheap.
Thank you so much, Agnes. I always learn something from you every time I hear you speak. I was struck when I saw the video Alive Inside, which is about the use of music and iPods, how powerful music can be, and how there was a woman in the video who couldn't leave her home because there was so much noise outside, but then they put music an iPod with her, and she was able to leave the house because she could, all the other noise was sort of eliminated. Do you have other strategies that you've heard of that you could share with us today?
Well, I'm still looking for a solution for Agnes, because if I put something and listen to music and it's personal to me and at a level I can tolerate, I'm not paying attention to the traffic sounds and what I should be doing. So it would create more distress for me, and I would fall more, and I fall enough. without doing that. I get accused of being drunk enough without them thinking I'm going along doing this, you know. So yes, but it can work if you've got someone with you and they're guiding you, and that's okay. I'm forgetting what you asked for, but I was in Ireland. I said I went to Ireland, and they were very proud of their sensory unit that they had created in accident and emergency. And they had the booklet, and they were saying, we are aware, and we know that accident and emergency is very noisy. So they had put a screen across that would deaden the noise a little. And they'd been really thinking, and they'd put something up that would locate us and tell us what day, what date, and where they were. And then the man said, and we've also got music. I says, my worst nightmare. Because how would you know what music was going to distress me or calm me down? And they said, oh, we never thought of that. I said, so you would really need to train the carers up so that they could bring the music in that would calm the person down. But the other thing that they'd done for the environment was, we all know that lighting can create ambience and can relax the person. So they had this different coloured lighting. So if the person was showing distress and agitation, they would turn the lighting to a certain colour. But if they wanted the person in the bed to be bright, they changed the colour, which was really quite nice. So they are looking. We've got great people in the care staff. They want to provide good care. You know, we'll never get it right for everyone. We only try, and it's by trial and error. This is pretty new, so we need to, it's global. We need to be speaking internationally and globally to people, collating information and trying to get tips and strategies booklet, a by us for us guide. On what to do and how to cope, and it'll only be suggestions, it'll only be a guide. Then you have to be clever, play with it so that you get it right for the person that you're caring for and that you love. My husband's got dementia, and we no longer can live in the same house because he sleeps with music on. And every room in the house has either a television or a radio, and he won't use headphones because it's his human rights. He likes it. And so we had to agree that this was not good for me, because I was falling in everything. And so he's got his own flat. We meet every day. We go to the gym, and we communicate. But again, Alan know this, it's relationships. And you get two people with dementia in the same house, who's going to give in? I don't know, you know. And we've been happily married for how long, Donna? Lots of years? 40-something years. And yeah, ups and downs, happily married with your fights and whatever. But I always could compromise with Alan's need for filling silence with noise. But when I got dementia, I couldn't do it, and he couldn't understand. You've done it all your life. Why are you being a nuisance now? You know. But he's got hyperacusis now. And the other thing was that to be in the gym, I go to the gym, I do my yoga, and you know, for some unknown reason, if you go to a gym, they think the louder the music, the harder you work. And no amount of me requesting the music to go down, they will not compromise. So I was presenting at something, and there was someone from Sheffield University, a lecturer, and he was scribing on a white note. I could never believe how clever people was getting this job. But anyway, he was doing this. And he'd listen to what I was saying, and I keep saying, I don't need a hearing aid, I need a hearing shield. You know, you put your hand up and it dulls the noise. And he was designing something, and audiologists don't like you putting anything in your ear. It's not a good practice. So that's why I thought something to cushion. And he was designing something. And then 3 weeks later, And he told me about this, and then 3 weeks later he sent me an email and he said, I went to see one of these manufacturers and they're quite interested in that. And then I got an email saying, Agnes, I think they're going to put this into a design product. Would you pilot it? And I thought, anything if it shuts out the noise so that I can be in a choice. So if I went out with Al last night and it was noisy background, or with Lisa, I could put this on. Mm-hmm. The other funny thing was, in the snow and various things, you get them earmuffs that you put on you. Yeah. I have been known to sit in a restaurant and pull one of them out. So anyway, that was it. So I don't know if that's helpful, Sri.
It does. And I also go into lots of homes that still use intercoms. Can you say something about that?
Yeah. Well, we went to a facility, and it was nursing, and they don't have intercoms. All the nurses have pagers, and they vibrate in their pocket. And how nice is that? Yeah. Do I really need to know if there's something going on in Mrs. Jones's room 5 doors up, and all the nurses are stressed? So they're paging. In this IT world, I don't know why we're not looking at IT solutions for our nurses so that they can. And I'm sure it's not good for them, to be getting all this noise, working in a noisy environment. So there is solutions.
Thank you.